Today is an absolutely spectacular day to dive deep into the latest jaw-dropping drama unfolding in Los Angeles. Grab your favorite beverage, settle into your most comfortable spot, and let us explore the explosive, heart-stopping twists that are about to rock the Spencer, Forrester, and Logan families to their very core. The stakes have never been higher, and the tragedy has never been more profound. The relentless corporate and personal wars in Los Angeles have pushed many characters to their absolute breaking points, but no one has suffered a more devastating downward spiral than Will Spencer. The young Spencer heir, once a beacon of loyalty and passion, has found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making, heavily manipulated by a woman who will stop at nothing to secure her place in the upper echelons of high society. Melissa Dillon, the ambitious and calculating assistant whose good girl facade has completely shattered, has executed her most diabolical scheme yet. Aware that Katie Logan Spencer has been fiercely investigating her dark past and suspecting her of being a Luna 2.0 gold digger, Dillon knew she was running out of time. With her fiercely protective mother, Darcy Dillon, scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles imminently, Melissa needed an inescapable leverage to lock down the Spencer fortune. She found that leverage in the oldest, most ruthless trick in the soap opera playbook, a faked pregnancy. Through sheer cunning and calculated deception, Melissa Dillon managed to swap laboratory test results, presenting Will with a falsified medical document that confirmed she was carrying his child. This fabricated pregnancy was the ultimate trap, designed to exploit Will's deeply ingrained sense of honor and responsibility. Will, who had been drowning in a severe, drunken depression ever since his catastrophic breakup with Electra Forrester, was completely blindsided. The guilt over his violent altercation at the bikini bar where he accidentally punched Eric Forrester in the face while aiming for RJ had already left him emotionally paralyzed. When Dillon dropped the pregnancy bombshell, Will felt the jaws of a steel trap snap shut around his life. He was cornered, isolated, and entirely unable to explain the horrifying truth to his family without sounding like a man trying to abandon his unborn child. Melissa Dillon did not just want a commitment. She demanded an immediate, rushed marriage. She preyed on Will's vulnerability, insisting that they needed to legitimize their family instantly to avoid the relentless scrutiny of the press and the judgment of the Forrester and Spencer clans. Will, completely broken and devoid of the will to fight, surrendered to her demands. He agreed to a hasty wedding ceremony to be held at the iconic Spencer building, a towering monument to his family's wealth and power that had suddenly transformed into his personal prison. The rapid planning of the nuptials sent shockwaves through Los Angeles, leaving everyone bewildered by the suddenness of the union. Katie Logan Spencer was absolutely horrified by the rushed wedding. Her maternal instincts had been screaming like sirens for weeks. She knew in her bones that Melissa Dillon was a manipulative opportunist, and she had been working tirelessly to unearth the skeletons in Dillon's closet. The sudden pregnancy and the immediate march to the altar only confirmed Katie's worst fears. Her son was being held hostage by a lie. Despite her desperate pleas and intense arguments with Bill Spencer, Katie could not stop the momentum. Will, blinded by a misguided sense of duty and suffocated by his own depression, stubbornly refused to back out, believing this was his penance for ruining his life with Electra. Bill Spencer, the ruthless patriarch, found himself in a remarkably complicated emotional position. While Bill had actively encouraged Will to move on from Electra in order to sever all emotional ties with the Forrester family, a shotgun wedding to a woman Katie deeply distrusted was never part of his master plan. Bill had advised Will to play the field, not to chain himself to a potential gold digger. Yet, seeing his son step up to take responsibility for a child appealed to Bill's sense of Spencer pride. He offered the Spencer building as the venue, sparing no expense to ensure that if a Spencer was getting married, it would be a spectacle of wealth and dominance. However, beneath his confident exterior, Bill watched his son walk through the preparations like a condemned man marching toward the gallows, and it deeply unsettled him. As the wedding day dawned, the Spencer building was transformed into a lavish, opulent venue. White floral arrangements cascaded down the grand staircases, and a string quartet played elegant melodies that echoed through the marble halls. Yet, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. In the bridal suite, Melissa Dillon reveled in her triumphant victory. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, adorned in designer silk and lace, she smiled a cold, calculating smile. She had successfully outmaneuvered Katie Logan, secured the Spencer heir, and guaranteed herself a life of unimaginable luxury. The fake pregnancy had worked flawlessly, and all she had to do was say "I do" to cement her untouchable status. Meanwhile, in the groom's suite, Will Spencer was experiencing a profound psychological collapse. Dressed in a sharply tailored, immaculate tuxedo, he stared blankly at his own reflection. He looked like a ghost. The physical toll of his depression, the sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of his impending doom had carved deep lines of exhaustion into his face. The tuxedo felt less like celebratory attire and more like a straitjacket, binding him to a future devoid of love, passion, or truth. Every breath he took felt shallow and insufficient. His mind was violently haunted by memories of Electra Forrester, her laugh, her touch, and the horrifying, shattered look on her face when she threw her necklace at him and ended their relationship forever. The true tragedy of the day unfolded in the moments just before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Seeking a brief moment of air, Will stepped out of the groom's suite and looked down the long, glass-paneled corridor of the Spencer building. There, standing near the elevators, partially hidden by a grand floral arrangement, was Electra Forrester. Despite her absolute fury over the violence at the bikini bar, despite aligning herself with RJ and her family, Electra's heart had betrayed her. She could not stay away. Hearing the news of Will's sudden marriage had shattered her remaining defenses, drawing her to the venue in a state of agonizing disbelief. Time seemed to stop entirely as Will and Electra locked eyes from across the vast corridor. The physical distance between them was negligible, but the emotional chasm was infinite. Electra's eyes were brimming with unshed tears, her expression a devastating portrait of absolute heartbreak and shattered dreams. In that single, silent exchange of glances, an entire lifetime of unspoken words passed between them. Will saw the depth of her lingering love, the raw pain of his betrayal, and the tragic realization that they were soulmates torn apart by corporate wars, family feuds, and his own catastrophic mistakes. The eye contact broke Will Spencer's soul into a million irreparable pieces. The reality of what he was about to do crashed over him with the force of a tidal wave. He was about to stand before an altar and pledge his life, his loyalty, and his future to Melissa Dillon, a woman he did not love, while the only woman who held his heart watched from the shadows, weeping. The agonizing realization of his entrapment triggered a severe, blinding panic attack. The walls of the Spencer building, a symbol of his family's invincible power, suddenly felt like they were rapidly closing in, threatening to crush him to dust. Gasping for air, Will stumbled backward, retreating into the groom's suite and slamming the heavy oak door shut. He threw the deadbolt, locking himself in a luxurious cage. His chest heaved as he slid down the door to the floor, pulling at the collar of his tuxedo as if it were strangling him. He was cornered. He could not walk out there and marry Melissa Dillon. The mere thought of speaking those vows made him physically nauseous. But he also could not walk out and humiliate his family, nor could he abandon the child he falsely believed Dillon was carrying. He was trapped in an impossible, agonizing paradox where every conceivable choice led to unbearable pain and destruction. Desperation is a dangerous catalyst, and in Will's fragmented, panicked state of mind, he sought the only immediate escape available. His frantic eyes darted around the room and landed on his travel bag. Inside, hidden away, was a prescription bottle of high-dosage sleeping pills medication he had been heavily relying on to combat the severe insomnia that had plagued him ever since Electra walked out of the beach house. In that moment of absolute, blinding despair, the pills did not represent a medical remedy, they represented a doorway into silence. They offered an escape from the suffocating reality, a way to stop the ticking clock, and a method to evade the cruel, inescapable trap that Melissa Dillon had set for him. With trembling hands, Will crawled toward the bag and retrieved the bottle. The rational part of his brain, the part that belonged to the strong, resilient Spencer heir, was completely drowned out by the deafening roar of his panic and heartbreak. He could still see Electra's tear-streaked face in his mind's eye. Unable to accept a lifelong commitment to a lie, and unable to bear the agony of hurting Electra any further, Will made a tragic, fatalistic decision. He opened the bottle, poured a massive, lethal quantity of the sleeping pills into his palm, and, without a second thought, swallowed them dry. The physical act of the overdose was a surrender to the darkness. Will collapsed onto the plush carpet of the groom's suite, his breathing rapidly becoming shallow as the heavy sedatives flooded his system. He closed his eyes, praying that when he opened them, the nightmare would be over, or better yet, that he would never have to open them at all. The immaculate wedding suit, tailored to perfection for a day of joyous celebration, slowly transformed into a tragic shroud as Will Spencer slipped away into a deep, dangerous unconsciousness. Outside the locked door, the atmosphere was growing increasingly frantic. The string quartet had been playing the prelude music for far too long, and the assembled guests were beginning to murmur in confusion. Katie Logan Spencer was pacing the floor, her anxiety skyrocketing with every passing minute. Her maternal intuition was screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. Bill Spencer, frustrated by the delay and eager to get the spectacle over with, finally marched down the corridor toward the groom's suite. He knocked firmly on the heavy oak door, calling out his son's name with his trademark commanding tone. When there was no answer, Bill's frustration quickly morphed into genuine alarm. He rattled the doorknob, finding it locked from the inside. Katie, running up behind him, felt her heart drop into her stomach. She began pounding on the wood, screaming Will's name, her voice cracking with pure terror. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Bill did not hesitate. Drawing on his physical strength and fueled by a father's primal panic, Bill took a step back and violently kicked the door, shattering the locking mechanism and bursting into the room. The sight that greeted Bill and Katie would be burned into their retinas for the rest of their lives. There, lying motionless on the floor, was their beloved son. Will was completely unconscious, his face deathly pale, his lips tinged with a terrifying shade of blue. An empty, overturned pill bottle lay on the carpet near his outstretched hand. The horrifying reality of the scene hit Katie with the force of a physical blow. A blood-curdling, agonizing scream ripped from her throat, echoing down the marble hallways of the Spencer building and silencing the wedding music instantly. Bill Spencer, a man who had faced down corporate titans and ruthless enemies without flinching, dropped to his knees in absolute terror. He grabbed his son by the shoulders, shaking him violently, begging him to wake up. When Will remained unresponsive, Bill immediately began frantic, desperate chest compressions, his tears falling onto Will's pristine tuxedo shirt. Katie collapsed beside them, sobbing hysterically as she pulled out her phone to scream for an ambulance. The lavish, opulent wedding venue had instantaneously transformed into a chaotic, nightmarish emergency scene. In the bridal suite, Melissa Dillon heard the screaming and the commotion. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Her calculated, manipulative scheme to secure the Spencer fortune had just triggered a horrific tragedy. As paramedics rushed into the Spencer building, their sirens wailing in the distance, the contrast between the white wedding flowers and the frantic medical trauma was profoundly disturbing. Electra Forrester, still standing in the corridor, watched in absolute horror as the man she loved was loaded onto a stretcher, fighting for his life. The fake pregnancy had cornered Will into a deadly decision, and as the ambulance sped away, the stage was set for an apocalyptic fallout. When the truth of Dylan's deception inevitably comes to light, the wrath of Katie and Bill Spencer will be biblical, promising a vengeance that will shake Los Angeles to its very foundations.